lives, but we can control our thinking. And so we were walking through the gospel according to Matthew, and in the Beatitudes, we realized that there were people who were poor, who were broken, who were thirsty, who were hungering, amen. And we realized that Jesus spoke to their situation, but he did not change their physical condition. It was their heart posture and their heart position that he wanted to work on. He wanted us to understand that if he changes our physical condition, but our heart position doesn't shift, then we'll still feel broke when we have $1 million. We'll still feel ill even after he's healed us. So it wasn't the physical condition he was worried about, it was the heart position he wanted to shift. And so we're going to continue this conversation in better thinking. So in a magazine column titled Ask Marilyn, Marilyn Vos Savant gave an interesting perspective on contentment. One reader wrote to her, and in the writing they said, they conducted a unique experiment. She conducted this experiment after she was dissatisfied that her neighbor's yard looked better than her own. She did what few have done, and she actually walked next door. So she left her own yard and she walked next door into the neighbor's yard. And from the neighbor's yard, she turned around and looked over the fence back at her own grass. And when she stood in the neighbor's yard, the grass in her own yard now looked greener than theirs. And so she asked, why does this occur? Does anyone know why the grass always looks greener on the other side? This is $1 million question. This is a statement that we've heard the majority of our life. Doc, how come the grass looks greener on the other side?
I think because you're getting the big picture and not seeing close up all the imperfections and things that are wrong.
My goodness, Doc. Did you hear what Doc said? Said that the grass seems to look greener on the other side because you're not close enough to see the dirt. The grass seems to look greener on the other side. The grass seems to look greener when you're driving by, not because they have a slide and a swing set and a nice flagpole, but the grass seems to look greener when you're on the other side because you're not close enough to see the dirt. Most of the time, things look better for others because we can't see their dirt. What are you saying, Pastor? I'm saying that perspective is kind of important. So in this gospel according to Matthew, as my wife comes to read, I want you to pay attention. We won't be before you long. If you can stand on your feet, the gospel according to Matthew speaks to our better thinking. Matthew chapter 26. You gotta walk through their yard, sweetheart. Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 26, verses 6 through 16. This is the Amplified version. It'll be on the outside screens if you can read along with my wife.
Now when Jesus was back in Bethany at the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster vial of very expensive perfume, and she poured it on Jesus' head as he reclined at the table. But when the disciples saw it, they were indignant and angry, saying, "Why all this waste of money? For this perfume might have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of their malice of this remark, said to them, "Why are you bothering the woman? She has done a good thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, wherever this gospel of salvation is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told in memory of her for her act of love and devotion." Then one of the 12 disciples, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I hand Jesus over to you?" And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, Judas began looking for an opportune time to betray Jesus.
You may be seated. So in our illustration, we realize that the grass often seems greener on the other side because we don't cross the fence to be able to see the dirt. I've got 4 points that may help better our thinking. First point is perspective. In verse 6, I want you to notice where Jesus is. He's in the home of Simon the leper. He's in a man's house who has leprosy. Now, if you don't understand what this means, this was a disease that was considered to be one of the worst. If you were considered to have to be leprous, you had to live outside of the city. It didn't matter how many children you had. It didn't matter whether your husband approved or not. If you were deemed to have leprosy, you had to live outside of the city. So Jesus is here with one of the lowest of low. He finds himself in a place where many of us would never be. But I stopped by to tell you today that sometimes to get something you've never gotten, you've got to go some places you've never been. Some places in life just tend to humble you. Some places in life just happen to shift your perspective. Some places in life cause you to do deep thinking. Places like where, Pastor? I'm glad that you asked. Places like children's hospitals. Places like a loved one's funeral. Places like jailhouses and third world countries, homeless shelters. Are anybody hearing what I'm saying? Sometimes in order to get better perspective, sometimes in order to stretch your thinking, you need to have some adjustments in your positioning. Sometimes you need to visit somebody who's in a worse position than you. It'll shift your heart posture. If we would ever stop complaining long enough to listen to someone else's problems, if we would ever observe someone else's situation, once in a while, maybe yours won't seem as bad. But instead, we go complaining about how bad our children are, but can you imagine having to bury one? I know your relationship or your marriage may not be the best right now, but talk to someone who has lost their spouse. Or the single individual who can't find a date. You think you got it bad. Sometimes to better your thinking, you gotta shift positions, change perspectives. Going out of your comfort zone may help you better your thinking. May help you better your thinking. Second point that we can gain from this text is to check our intent. You want to better your thinking? Take a look at your intent. Why is it that I'm doing this, and why is it that I'm feeling this way? Verse 8 says, "But when Jesus' disciples saw this, they were indignant and angry. And they said, why all this money? Why all this waste of money? This perfume might have been sold at a high price and the money given unto the poor." So in verses 8 and 9, we find the disciples super upset. One in particular, according to the Gospel of John, he records this man's name as Judas. And he says this is a waste of money. This could have been sold and given to the poor. And may I remind you that Judas was the treasurer. His job was to oversee the apostles' finances. And it would seem normal for the treasurer to wonder where the money was going. It would seem normal for the treasurer to advise them about wasting. But I stopped by to tell you just for a moment that anything honestly and truly done for Jesus is never a waste of time or money. Anything that's ever honestly honestly and truly done for Jesus is never a waste of time or money. But sometimes you got to pay attention to people and their intent. Sometimes people have to pay attention to you and your intent. Sometimes you even got to watch the people inside of the church. Because this is not the first time that people have tried masking their heart with ministry. This is not the first time that you've ever seen somebody try to mask their heart or their intentions with ministry. What do you mean, Pastor? I mean this. If you're a greeter in this great church, do you greet because you love Jesus and you love his church and you love the people that he died for? Or are you greeting because you just got your hair done and you want everyone to see you? The intent, sometimes we mask our heart, right, with ministry. For me, do I really care to see people in my city be better? Or I'm in this for some secret agenda, maybe to move up in the presbytery or become the mayor one day? No, not at all. But why do you do what you do? Well, what is the purpose? If you want to better your thinking, sometimes you want to check the intent. Why are you about to do what you're about to do? Why are you about to do this? I was blessed by my dear sister, Lindsay Husted, when she said, I just want to come and serve. I was so encouraged that I was going to give her an opportunity to preach, to speak. She said, I just want to serve as a daughter. As a daughter. At that moment, Sister Alice and I said, conversation is closed. Let her come and serve. I love her heart posture. I honor her heart posture. She says, I don't want anything. The intent. The intent. Check your intent. Because Jesus says in verse 10, he was aware of the malice in their remark. He sensed that there was malice in the statement. He sensed that there was evil intent. Judas didn't really care about the poor being fed. As you continue to read in the Gospels, you realize Judas was kind of greedy. I just stopped by to tell you not to mask your heart with ministry. And don't mask your heart with anything else for that matter. So Jesus goes on to say in verse 10, I'm almost done, to keep your heart thinking straight, to keep your mind right, Jesus should probably be at the center of all you do. So the third point is value. To better your thinking, the third point that we can draw out of this text is value. In verse 10, Jesus says, why do you bother her for doing such a good thing to me? Watch this. He says, why do you bother her for doing such a good thing to me? He didn't say she was doing a good thing around him. It wasn't a good thing for him, but he said it was a good thing to him or with him. This points to intimacy. Jesus is my main thing. If I can be honest for the next 2 seconds, I can't serve you well without being with him consistently. I can't serve you well without him constantly steering my heart. He has to give me strength in order to serve you properly. If I can just be honest, I would have given up on this community a long time ago. I would have given up on this church a long time ago. I would have given up on my family a long time ago. But constant time with Jesus reminds me that he never gave up on me. Just constant time with Jesus reminds me that he never gave up on me, so I can't give up on you. I just stopped by to tell you that I need time with him. I've got to value the worship more than I value the work. Intimacy over objects. I know we live in a consumer-based society, but we place stuff over souls too often. We place things over thoughts too often. Harm over hearts. I'm just talking about value. Sometimes we're more concerned with the work than we are with the worship. If you want to think a little bit better, value time with people more than you value the possessions that surround them. Value time with people. People say we do a lot of stuff for Jesus, but I'm more concerned about the amount of time you spend with Jesus. Only being with him can make doing this stuff worth it. Here's my last point. I'm out of your way. And better thinking. If you're going to be better, you must give someone permission to tell you where and how you can improve. This kind of floored me as I was walking through this text. That in order to become better, you got to give someone permission to tell you where and how you can improve. How am I going to become a better pastor if no one can tell me where I need to improve? If in my thinking I believe I have it all correct, then where do I get better? I don't. Instead, what I'll get is offended. Last point is to be careful of offense. Because instead of getting better, oftentimes, church, we get offended. Verse 14 says, then one of the 12 disciples, who were called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and he said, what are you willing to give me if I hand Jesus over to you? And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, Judas began looking for an opportune time to betray Jesus. He was offended. How do I know? Because the text shows us, it says that after Judas was chastised, he was told about himself. He wanted to spend the money. He wanted to go and shoot this, and he wanted to take it and feed the poor. And Jesus says, wait a minute, the poor are always going to be with you. I'm not. He was corrected. He was chastised. Oh, I'm trying to help somebody so that you can stay in church for a little bit longer. He was chastised. He was corrected. He was lined up. And not only was he lined up, he was humbled, because Jesus says, this is how you're thinking, but I promise you, everywhere this gospel is preached, this woman who poured out this oil on me will be talked about. Guess what we're doing as this gospel is being preached? We're talking about this woman who poured out this oil. And so he was humbled, he was chastised, he was being laid out before the people as being wrong. He was being corrected. And immediately after this, the next verse says, then Judas, one of the 12, went and said, I'll betray him. I'll turn him in. He hurt my feelings by telling me how I could be better, so I left. I'm trying to help somebody stay in the church. If you're going to be better, you've got to give someone permission to tell you without being offended and leaving like Judas did. If you're going to be better, you've got to give someone permission to tell you. As I close out this message, I just want to tell you that if you get offended, don't forget that he loves you. If you get offended, don't forget that I love you. Remember where the conversation began, church. It began at a leper's house, a place where most people wouldn't even go. But I told you sometimes to get some things you've never gotten, you've got to do and go some places you've never gone. He's speaking to our hearts, Lake Street. God has been speaking to our thinking, because I believe he's about to bring us into a place many haven't been or even imagined that he would be. But we must be mindful of these 4 things to help our thinking. 1, perspective. Perspective. We only see life from our perspective. We don't get close enough to see the dirt. 2, the intent. What you're thinking, right, controls your actions, and your actions control your life, but you can control your thinking. Why are you about to do what you're about to do? Why are you going to say this thing? Why are you going to do this thing? Why are you going to act this way? 3, value. We must value people over the possessions that surround them. This is better as you're thinking. Oftentimes we do too many funerals and people, you hear it all the time, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Value people. And the last thing to help better your thinking is to be mindful of offense. We get offended so quickly as if we're supposed to be perfect. You got to give someone permission. As I take my seat, I just remind you it's going to take courage to think different. It takes courage to think different because thinking is going to change your actions and people are going to start talking about you. Because actions change your life. Whatever he's about to do is going to be a new thing. And everything that we're going through, everything that you're going through is preparing you for something amazing. And it's just a few verses past this that Jesus would sit with his disciples for communion. As he taught them prior to the Last Supper, he has also taught us prior to our communion with him. Man, just add as a last piece. Judas was invited. He was invited. If he was invited, we've all got room for the invitation. Better thinking. Turn this portion of the service over to my dear sister.